Hello, welcome to another Loom Press podcast. It's been a good week for the Loom Press podcast. Normally we take a few months in between them, but we've got two in a row this week. Here we are today with Barry Currivan, who's a Dublin-based poet and spoken word artist. I suppose you would class yourself as a spoken word artist, Barry. I suppose.
Primarily, Lee, that would be the thing. I would say sometimes when I introduce, I say that like I'm a spoken word artist, like, and then sometimes the gods of poetry throw me a bone, and something poetic comes out despite my best efforts. So
Very good. Yeah. I think it was one of my other podcasts with John Butler. We were talking about where does poetry come from, and it's oftentimes you look back at something you wrote a while ago and you think, geez, did I write that? I
oh
think
yeah, and that I find that and that's one of the things I'm really sort of discovering at the moment, that it's strange that after a certain amount of time you're reading something as the audience. You're reading it as the audience, and if you get a good audience reaction to you of 20 years ago or whatever, or so many years ago, that's a very pleasant and sort of and weird at the same time.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
but it's great when it happens.
yeah. So this is your collection here. If
That's it.
now the focus is after blurring it, but if not, if what? That's the title.
That's it.
Tell us a bit about this book. I know you told me about the title, but maybe you might want to just tell our listeners a bit about why
Well,
you named it that.
yeah, the title is based that, like, is as an aspiring poet, or as a young, when you hear some poems that kind of inspire you and really want, and say, some I'd love to write some poetry, like, um one of the most, say, and if I did write a poem, if I am going to write a poem, well, I'd love to write a poem like If by Rudyard Kipling, which is very awe-inspiring, and it stands up very well, like, today, um but that's taken, so I can't write If. So if not If, what?
What?
So the book is what?
There you go.
Because it's
What?
not If.
Excellent. Yeah, and I don't know if my viewers can see, but the the symbol here, it's a Chinese symbol.
It's a Chinese/Japanese. Like, most of the Japanese sort of characteristics, or kanji, are actually Chinese characters. But it's to say, but it's the word in Japanese is nani, but it's the Japanese word for what.
What? Yeah.
And
What?
so a lot of the other words that are sort of faint in the background are what, in as many
Different.
different languages I could find in Google Translate, and
Mm,
put there. So it's
yeah. And why did the Japanese or the Chinese slash Japanese symbol, why did that take precedent there with your
well,
cover?
it's actually very symmetrical, because it works. And at one point, a good few years ago, when I wanted to try improve my kind of handwriting, for some strange reason, and I also wanted to do something weird, I started learning Japanese, and I got to a certain point, but I needed to do conversation classes. I needed to get conversation, or I needed to go to actually improve my sort of spoken stuff. But in the process, like, I learned, like, there's two there's basically three alphabets. There's hiragana, katakana, and kanji. Kanji is all the symbols, and the other ones are like sort of phonetic They're like, yeah, they're sounds, they're alphabets for sounds, like A, E, I, O, U, and stuff like that. So, but I kind of knew a lot, and I could, if you were to start talking in Japanese, I could take dictation,
Mm.
but I wouldn't necessarily know what you're saying. But I can know the sounds, and I could write it down. But by doing that, I became familiar, or I started to start practicing some of the kanji characters, which they say there's a kind of an explanation as to why it is like that, why that shape is there, but
Mm.
it's very, very vague. Like, you say, oh, this is the kanji for box
Mm.
because it looks like a box. No, it doesn't. Like, it's so. But I started, one of the things I was doing. I said, I wonder if I can pick a kanji character to put for every poem that I was going to write. Like, as to be the toy, if I was thinking of publishing something. and
Mm.
that say, okay, if that was a poem, what kanji would I write? Because they're really nice, like,
Yeah.
if they're well written, like, it's a whole art form to actually just Japanese calligraphy. So I got kind of a bit taken up with that. So I saw a lot of things, and I just like the look at it. Just that one jumped out because it's very symmetrical,
Mm.
uh, and it's a good kind of centerpiece for that little tableau in the middle.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is so this was this a lot, I suppose the poems in this collection, were they a long time in the making?
It's a
Or
very, very mixed bag. There's stuff there that goes back, like, I would have written like probably 30 years ago. And there's stuff I wrote this time last year. There would be stuff that I don't remember when I wrote it.
yeah.
And there's stuff there's one there, like, my garden is full of clumsy birds, which I wrote in June last year.
Mm.
But I really liked it. And there's another one there, called Honest Endeavor. And that was also one that I wrote sort of around this time last year. But it was really just what worked, because I have an awful lot of stuff. I have
Yeah.
a lot of stuff. And one of the big things, like, I was very, very keen what I wanted, not just the content of the book, but how much should be in it. Like, I think one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen I've seen being made, like with poetry, was to do too much.
Mm.
And like that is exactly the size it is and the length it is, because I believe uh that's a palatable amount of poetry in a
Yeah.
book like that. Sorry, I'll just show you the example I have here.
Yeah.
Don't know whether you can you see that?
I can, yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah,
quite
this
like actually the way you've presented yours as well with the
yes. Well, you
yeah.
see the original, that was all Faber and Faber. That was Faber and Faber that had used this sort of same sort of tableau. So mine is like a tribute to the Faber and Faber tableau. So a lot of people, when they brought up, like, this is Philip Larkin, but a lot of people from that era, like Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes and all that, like when their collections came out, basically they would have had that with different shades and different sort of sizes, but basically that FFFFF
Mm.
Faber and Faber, like a repeat pattern, and a tableau in the middle
Mm.
with some graphic. So, but this book was actually Philip Larkin, The High Window, and it was one of my favorite, because I love the stuff in it. I was very familiar with the stuff that was in it. I love all the stuff that's in it, and it just felt right to me. Like, it was just the right size, that it wasn't intimidating, that if there was something that you didn't like, it wasn't so that if you passed over something, you would go back if you got to the end, you would go back, because it would be only one or two that maybe
Mm.
you kind of struggled with. You need to give a bit of time that didn't really get you the first time. So I was
Yeah.
very keen on having something that felt like that in your hand, and that had that amount. It's approximately the same number of pages and the same size font on my book as there is in that book
Yeah.
there. So it was very, I said, I'd try and pick up whatever was good about that, in the feel and the look of it. I'll try and take that on, and then use that format to present my own stuff.
And it does feel good, yeah, and it is a nice size. I think it was it reminds me of Alfred Hitchcock, I think it was, who said a movie shouldn't be any longer than something to do with how long it takes to between going to the toilet or something like that. It should be
Yeah,
the amount of time it takes before you need to empty your bladder, you know.
yeah, yeah,
And maybe
yeah,
it's the same with poetry, yeah, because um, I suppose it just depends. Yeah, I mean, like if you've got someone like Patrick Kavanagh's collected poems, it's quite large, but I mean that's that's all
yeah.
of
Well,
them.
that's the thing. See, a collected poems is different, but it's like if you go to somebody, a collected poems is almost like a greatest hits or an anthology of everything they did. But like putting out a book, like at the time, like say things like this, like whatever Philip Larkin or whatever, or people like that, when they brought out a book, when they brought out a collect, it was like an album. It was
Mm.
even though it was a collection, it was a piece,
Yeah,
and there would be some, and it was like it didn't. So they would ultimately end up in some sort of doorstop thing, like, doorstop book of which is a collection poem, probably edited and uh, placed in a certain order, probably a chronological order, which when the author or the author or publisher of the actual collection as they came out, they would be fully in charge of the order that things appeared in.
Mm.
Whereas like sometimes when you get a massive collection to put so there's nobody really equipped to pick a running order, so to speak. So they put them in chronological order or something like that, or
Yeah.
just break them up into categories, which possibly the original artist or poet might not have done in the first place. So the actual collections as they have selected by the poet or the writer themselves have a different should have a kind of life of their own. Should be sort of an independent a collection and be a piece uh, as a collection.
Mm.
That'd be my whereas like ultimately they will end up in hopefully in some sort of doorstop compilation of the collected works of which which will have
Of,
a whole
of,
different
of Barry Currivan.
criteria for selection.
Yeah, exactly. Very good. Now this isn't your first book, actually. You had another one, Inside Rowing, the Outside Handbook.
It's yeah. This
Yeah.
was way back when I that was published in 1989 when I was actually still active. This was this thing here,
Oh wow.
and it was myself. I was actually rowing. I rowed in, and I'm still involved in Neptune Rowing Club in Island Bridge. And another guy who was in the crew with me, fella called Gary O'Neill, and he was actually an animation. He was there was a at one time there was a an animation studio based in Dublin called Sullivan Bluth Studios, big international. They were brought out. Was obviously back in the late 80s, and they were supposed to be like the new or competition for Disney, and they brought out a few with the couple of feature films, but they hired a lot of animation artists like from Dublin, and Gary O'Neill, who was in the boat with me, so he was working there, and he was animation. So the book ended up like me. It's basically me writing sort of a collection of stuff about sort of funny takes or sort of tall tales from Rowan in verse form, and like Gary did the illustrations, the derogatory illustrations of typical oarsmen or stereotype oarsmen, like
Very
So,
good.
and then when I think back of it, like it was very brave. Like, I was doing it. I was coming out of nowhere. Other than I used to write, I started writing pieces like as just to kind of entertain the guys, like entertain the crews. When every now and again when they'd have a Christmas dinners, there would be one night where everybody had to do a party piece, and some people would sing, some people tell jokes. There might not even be a musician there. You just had to stand up in front of all your mates and perform something. So I started telling jokes. But I didn't really like doing it, and I learned off one of these big sort of barroom recitations by a guy called Robert Service called "The Shooting of Dan McGrew," and it was just one of these barroom ballads, and I learned that off and I never performed it because once I started doing it, I says, I could do this. I could do something like this that would be relevant, that would be about basically blowing up some story, something that happened during the year, and turn it into a big barroom ballad about basically where everybody in the room was a character in it. So I started writing like that, and then then I did that for a couple of years, and then I have no idea where I got the guts to try this. But it actually, even though I didn't think so at the time, um, in poetry terms, it was hugely successful. Like
Yeah.
I, the in 98, I print once again. I got a bit of backing from the amateur rowing union, and I ended up I printed 1,500 copies. And within a year, this was pre-internet and everything, and
Mm.
but I had and would have traveled a bit to the UK and that, like going to competitions. But like within a year, we'd sold 1,000.
Wow. Yeah. That's
And
big enough for
so,
poetry.
but that was massive. Like, and I didn't realize. Like, I thought this was. I regard because I knew nothing. I'd no meter. I
Mm.
said, I thought, well, that was a failure. I was thinking I'll print 1,500 and whatever. Next month I'll be going back looking for more. But
Yeah,
I wasn't basing it on anything except pure optimism,
yeah. And you actually
And
had a reprint there in, was it 2009?
in 2009, I did a reprint, yeah,
Wow,
and yeah, it was probably sold about another 1,000 then.
not bad, not bad.
But because it's very much I would have sold it like to people who are more into rowing than poetry,
Yeah.
you know. But I know a lot of people still talk to me about it, and they're very fond they're very glad to have a copy. So that's very good. It's very reassuring,
Yeah, absolutely. We might hear one of the poems from your new collection anyway. The poem maybe we could start off with. I like the poem "Looking Good," Alice, on page 28. I thought that was a good one.
Yeah, do you like yeah, and basically that was based on it was around Christmas one time, and I actually had it. I had a dream. I just had a dream over Christmas, and I dreamt where there was a lot of parties and get-togethers, and I dreamt I was at this get-together, and an aunt of mine who had passed away good few many years ago. My aunt Alice had passed away many years ago, and she was at the party, and looking great, and but I just thought like that. So the that sort of got me going, and then once I said this sounds a great idea, and then you think, but you got to think it through.
Mm.
So it's okay. This is called Looking Good, Alice. I dreamt of a party where only the dead I'd known in life had been invited, all dressed as they were apt to, their features as last I had sighted. Well, we mingled, we chatted as you do, as if none of this was strange. I felt it would be rude to say, but you're dead, and remark how they had changed. For the silent ones had found their voice, the sad had abandoned their sadness, the mad had found some sanity, and the sane had found some madness. The angry ones had found their calm. The troubles seemed resolved. There was only me and me alone with problems yet to solve. So despite these long desired reunions, it was all a frightful bore. There was nothing the dead could do for me, nor I for them any more. There was nothing the dead could tell me, nothing I had not heard before. I dreamt of a party with only my dead, and woke loving my living much more.
Yeah, it's it really struck me that poem. When I was reading it. Yeah, and
Yeah, it's treasure. It's about like treasuring the now. Like don't because there's actually that would be a kind of a theme in that. Like even the opening poem, which is that what was it New Lang Syne? It's about like having meeting people, and they're all about that Bruce Springsteen song "Glory Days."
I think so. Yeah,
It's all about these guys meeting in the bar, and they're all just talking. And the thing about it is, like, it's quite an old song, so this scene, the American, all these old boys talking about like what they wear, but they're probably still quite young. I just still these young people who are talking about the old days,
Mm.
and as if, well, it's all down, it's all downhill from here. Like where I very much like no, what's next? What's next? It was yeah, that was good, but what's next? So not about harping on. You can't bring back old people, the older people who have gone. You can't bring back certain times of your life that are gone. You have to move on and try and make the best of the next one. Next what's coming up next, or make something happen. If there's nothing coming,
Yeah,
go find somewhere where something's coming.
I think it's yeah, it's definitely a fallacy. What do they call it? Golden age thinking.
Yeah,
There's actually a great film, Midnight in Paris. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's about this guy who he's a writer. He's played by Owen Wilson plays him, and
is that a
he
Woody Allen film? Is it?
Woody Allen film. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
he wants to go back to. He'd love to be like in Paris in the 20s. A golden age where all these writers and artists existed and lived together. But then he somehow manages to go back in time to the 20s. And he's there with Ernest Hemingway and all this, and then he realizes because they're talking about another golden age say 30 or 40 years before that in your
Yeah,
belly pocket, and he's like, oh, he realizes, oh my God, we need to live in the now because, the present is where we're at. The present is our golden age. This is our
yeah,
time.
exactly.
I think
Yeah.
that's, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Very good. Yeah, no, it's a definitely, because obviously there's a lot of funny poems in this as well, but I think the few serious ones definitely pack more of a punch because of that when you sort of highlight them next to it. Uh, let's see. Oh, and I was amazed when I was reading the back. You were on the Jerry Ryan show and on the Late Late Show many a year ago.
Yeah, well, one shortly after I brought out the book, I kind of changed, and I'd actually stopped. I was still I stopped sort of being a competitor and around being an athlete. I was doing some coaching and that, and but I knew from writing the stuff about the run, I knew I could write. I'd written the stuff about, but I knew I could kind of write about other things as well, like and I would have very much appreciated like listening to people who wrote something. Like there was a lot of programs on older programs I would have seen called "That Was the Week That Was." There used to be BBC things to where they kind of did things a bit, to be blunt, they did things a bit better, and they would have and they would have somebody who would write something about what happened the week that had just gone by. But Mike, I won't say I had a cunning plan, but once I saw an opportunity, uh, I was actually working. I was working night shifts for about 8 years in a factory, and in the morning time I would be, before I went to bed or whatever, and I'd be listening to Jerry Ryan, and there was a competition from Abracababra or something. They wanted to write a jingle like for us, an ad for some new product they were bringing out, like baguettes. They were going to be selling baguettes. I said, probably this is probably the dawn of the chicken fillet roll, but not a chicken fillet roll, but of that things of that ilk. There's like this whole sort of cuisine de France was kind of hitting the country, or that type of roll, and I did it, and I won. I won and the competition was to win, was a holiday, a holiday. So with Falcon Travel or something like that. But the good thing about it was that like my contact then, I won the prize. I said like, we'll be contacted and the person that I was contact was the producer of the show. So I now had the phone number of the producer and a reason to talk to the producer of the Jerry Ryan show. And I had the entry I put in for the competition was in the form of a poem, and I would say like I probably I won it like a kind of hands down. And but I just contacted him. I said, look, after we sort of got through the formalities of what do we do, how do we collect my prize, and so on. I said, like, just by the way, says if you're interested in anything like doing stuff like this on something that you're doing the program, like, let me know and I can write something for you. So I'll do it like for free. If you want a couple of trial, I'll do it for free a couple of times, just to see. I'm not looking for, but I was really anxious to see what I could do with it. Um, so yeah, he gave me a few tries, and then after sort of about one or two, uh, they would ask me to do something right specifically. So they're doing something next week. They're going to some program or something, and they wanted me to comment on something that was going on at the moment, write a piece about it. So I write that. Now we got there was very, very it wasn't a lot, it was very, very small amount of money that you got for doing it, like, and it'd be kind of haphazard because the Jerry Ryan show was a 3 hour long thing, and suddenly you could be on, there'd be something. Jerry was great, man. He could tackle all sorts of subjects, and there might be something really, really gruesome and horrible he was talking about. And now we're going to go over to Barry Currivan and see what he's got to say about this. And I'd still be in shock from listening to whatever it is. And I said, like, I don't know whether I can do this. But so I did that for a while, and but it was very erratic. And then I put together like a kind of a mixtape of bits that I'd done for Jerry Ryan, and I sent it round to a couple of places. And I found another guy's fellow, Ronan Kelly, who was actually the sort of head, I think he's the head producer of the Doc on One thing on RTE now, on the RTE radio. And he was produced, they were bringing out a show called Talk Radio, which was going to be on Saturday mornings. And this I think was the show that was actually going to replace. You remember you heard from the famous Scrap Saturday Just
No, I don't
with
know.
Dermot Morgan and all this, like which is a lot of political satire. This was on Saturday morning as an RTE radio, but they were taking that slot, and so he asked me would I try write about something, and I wrote one or two. I wrote the first thing I remember having to write about for it was there was a famous incident where Boris Yeltsin was supposed to be paying a state visit to Ireland, and the plane landed in Shannon, and every dignitary in the country, including Albert Reynolds, who was the Taoiseach, whatever, was up, red carpet out, thing out, and Boris never got off the plane. And the rumor was that he was just stone cold drunk. He couldn't get up, like, you know.
Mm.
So they were all standing on the tarmac. So I wrote a big sort of piece about just sort of comedic piece about this, and that went down very well. And then I wrote one or two others which just I kind of nailed it, and that was I was kind of locked in, and I did that like for about kind of 4 years. That show went on. Now it would have been off during the summer, but when I came back, it went on for about 4 years. But the thing, and I know if I had say if I was me now, I would have sort of run and kind of done something with that. But all my ambitions there, I was still up to my neck in rowing. I
Yeah.
was coaching rowing. I was coaching people on the national team. I was coaching on the national team, and I was going to world championships with rowers as coach. So like all my ambitions were in that form, and I was delighted to have a chance to have an outlet. But at one point, I got a few gigs like where people asked me to do things like after dinner speaking and so on, and I did that, and they went well. But I was just thinking, I said like, this is no this is no way I'd want to make want to make a living. I don't want to be having make a living where it depends on people liking you.
Mm.
Because it's all right if they like you now, but if they don't, like, what would you have? Because I wasn't that I had huge standards. I was particularly sort of prudish, but there was a lot of things I wasn't gonna do, and there was a lot of people. Most people who I'd seen sort of getting on. Like at that point, it was the dawn of the sort of alternative comedy was really coming on the scene, and everything was just kind of it was a bit of a kind of a race to the bottom, even though everything was just getting more vulgar and vulgar and vulgar. I know if you've met me, you'll probably know I have no problem with that, but I didn't want it to be my job.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be the thing to say, oh, you're the guy that curses and swears all the time, in rhyme, like, But I knew that's what it would have taken to make a living out of it. And I
Yeah.
wasn't going to do it, so
You-
I didn't pursue it too hard, and I had lots of other interests. It was only in the last couple of years when I was coming close to retirement age. I sort of dropped out. It was I was coaching in Rowan up to about 2017.
mm.
It was only when I stopped doing that that I kind of threw myself back into the started writing and perform. Well, I was always writing, but trying to get a performance outlet, which is about 2017. I started going to the circle sessions, and then I was hooked. I loved that,
Do you do you regret taking a step back? Because obviously you'd I mean to be invited on the Late Late Show, so that's a great achievement for like a poet, like but had that taken that step back, maybe you felt it was the right thing at the time, but in hindsight,
Well, well, you see, the thing was, it sounds really good to take part in the league, but like you kind of had to be there. Like I write funny stuff, but I do have aspirations. I do think every now and again I hit on something good. But if I did not want to make a career as a court jester,
yeah, yeah, it's fair.
that wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to see like all my kind of inspired profound stuff, but a lot of profound stuff, like, but it would still have been humorous, would have been found, and like I just knew that, like, if you go down that road of being too much, even if you have it in you, you won't be given the chance to be not the court jester. You'll just be saying, "Oh, I love your early stuff.
Mm.
Piss off." I loved your early stuff. You're awful dry now. What happened to you? Where
Oh yeah,
I wanted to it. I would have liked to have done a bit more, but I don't necessarily regret it. Like, I kind of I stepped away from it. It sort of stepped away from me as well, because when the show that I was doing, and even though I was on it week in, week out, um, and there was a show, not too dissimilar show came on afterwards, replaced it. Um, but it was funny. I remember it was kind of a bit of a probably pointing to this thing, that if you're not, I was regarded as part of that show. And for anybody who was coming in with the new show to start pulling on the old show, or the older, they didn't want to do that. They wanted to create their own thing. They didn't want to borrow from anything else. So I was kind of out in limbo as well. But as it wasn't my job, it was something I did on the side. I was working. I said, like, I was working I was working night shifts in
Mm.
a printing works.
Yeah.
Like, and I was doing this, and it suited me to do it suited me. But so I was always kind of surprised that I got any traction at all. So it wasn't it when it sort of evaporated, or like, I was very lucky. I fell on my feet getting the gig I got. I was just there at the right time, and I wasn't prepared. Having done some gigs, done some after dinner speaking, and seeing what it would take, and the traveling, and the whole kind of the timetable of working into sort of work in that field was not compatible like with everything else I was doing. I was I said, like, I was very heavily involved in rowing, and anybody that's involved in anything, any sport, like if you're in the poetry field, you're only going out when athletes are going to sleep. Serious athletes and their coaches are going to sleep when you're going out.
Yeah.
So they were just so incompatible sort of lifestyles.
Mm.
And I was things were going good in the other one, so it wasn't that hard, because I could still write, and I could still write, and I could still say, well, keep me power when the time is right. I'll use some of this stuff, and a lot of the stuff that some of the stuff that would be in the book would have been written, or possibly originated during that time of not doing any performing. But I would say they all then would have been revisited after I did started going back performing, because performing really shows you, really, really puts pieces through the ringer, and
Mm.
you see what's communicating and what's not, or where you're losing people, and that you need this where something needs a bit of rework, or realize that it might be a good piece on paper, but it's not suitable for uh, performing as such. It could be okay, like, but not as part of a set in the type of venue that we or events that we go to.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um, I'm just conscious we've about 6 minutes left. I just want to quickly ask you
oh my
about.
God.
I know time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
I just wanted to quickly ask you about fugitive ideation publications. You told me the last day I saw that I think you registered this company or something.
I registered that trademark, and that kind of look of this fella, the fella kind of behind the bars. And the idea is that it's runaway ideas. And the expression I actually came across in one of the sort of big books that had a big impact on me, was a book called Look Homeward Angel by American author Thomas Wolfe. And then he wrote another book called Of Time in the River. And in that book, there's a scene where but the main character goes to visit his old uncle, who's very always spinning yarns and making big plans. And his wife's over in the corner, just it's like, it's another word. She, instead of saying bullshit, she says fugitive ideation. She says you dismiss fugitive ideation, just runaway idea, like, ideas just getting out of hand and running away with themselves. So I thought that was. I remember reading. I just sort of leave one of these, just sort of put the book down and says, it's almost, I don't need to read any more of this book. I've got what I wanted to in this book. Just that whole idea of fugitive ideation. I love the sound of it, and just it was a very nice way of saying, like, you're talking through your arse, like,
Yeah. And you registered that a long time ago.
a long time ago, because I had a plan. I remember I was gonna do. Well, I actually did create. I had it posted for a while. I made a website called Fugitive Ideation. And the app that I created it on, it was kind of a lot of things. I realized that like I create Apple used to with their machines they used to have a, like when you buy an Apple you get certain apps that are built in, and they one called I kind of was something web, Apple Web or something, or iWeb, and you could build a website and they would and host it, but they ceased the app, and I just took it down, and it kind of didn't really know what to do. I didn't really know what to do because I wasn't out performing or anything at that stage. I was still very heavily involved in Rome. Still, it didn't suit me with the stage my children were at, and that for me to be heading out at night. But like I didn't go out, like I didn't go back out performing. All my youngest child was in his 20s
Mm.
before I went out, because before I started heading out into the wild in the middle of the night, like, to go to poetry gigs, because it was just kind of like sort of that was my sort of standpoint. Once everybody was kind of independent, well, then I could go out and be a bit
Well, yeah.
stupid again. But, but, but there's a time you can't be stupid.
No. We just have about 2.5 minutes left. Maybe before we finish, you could read us the last poem in the collection. When can you start? I really like
Yeah,
that as well. Yeah. So on page 60. Yeah.
yeah. The only legend to be is a living one. Don't fret your legacy. Consider what's to do, not done, and screw posterity. Consider now and those around you. Venture forth from there. If it's not good in the here and now, when will it be? And where? Stick with what is and what isn't, not what may or may not be. The only legend to be is a living one, and screw posterity.
Amen.
Amen. Yeah, so just like do it now. Like it's still part of that sort of whole vibe of don't dwell on other stuff. Like like don't stop planning on being a legend.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
go out there and
Just do
and
it.
start acting the legend. Like
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a nice way to end it.
Yeah.
It's a lovely collection, and hopefully we'll see more in the near future as well.
Yeah, well, that's it. I say I have enough stuff, and I have titles and everything already. But the next one will be called Tame Life Photography.
hmm, there you go now.
Not
Tim,
wildlife photography, but tame life photography.
very good.
Uh, so to be that, so that will probably be the next one. I just gotta pull it out and probably be slightly bigger. I've kind of indulged myself with this whole I want this size and I want that. Now I've got the template. The book will probably look the same, but I'll probably squeeze a bit more into that because I just wanted to get one that looked like the other one out first, like my pet book, my
Yeah,
high Philip Larkin book. I wanted to have one that looked like that first.
yeah. Well, look, we're about to finish now, so thank you for coming on, Barry. Great to
All
have
right.
you, and
Thanks, Lee. Great.
absolutely,
And
we'll hopefully see more of your work again soon.
yes, we'll talk and we'll meet again, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Okay. See you
Bye
later.
bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye.